Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Honor, Courage, and Commitment Luncheon. Good afternoon, our Superintendent, Admiral Carter, our Commandant, Captain Chadwick, Rear Admiral Mike Manzanier, welcome. Manazer, excuse me. Nasty. Major General John Whistler and Major General John Sattler and guest speaker, Mr. Bill Kraus, welcome. My name is Rear Admiral Bluesbaker, and I serve here as the Director of Influencer Development at the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership. So on behalf of the Director of the Stockdale Center, Colonel Art Athens, I'd like to welcome you to the Honor, Courage, and Commitment Luncheon. The Stockdale Center's mission is to empower leaders to make courageous ethical decisions, and we envision that this luncheon that you're at today is actually going to contribute to that particular part of the mission. And we designed this seminar series, which you're at, to accomplish four objectives. The first objective is to provide a unique and somewhat hospitable and enjoyable venue where you can listen as people address core issues of honor and courage and commitment. And they're going to bring diverse professional backgrounds as they talk to us about this. The second goal is to have you here nominated by your supervisors and nominated by your company officers for this luncheon. And this selection process kind of narrows the amount of attendees here. So the goal is to make it a smaller group. And we want to have a smaller group to invite you as not only listeners but participants in what we're doing today. We want you to think about engaging in purposeful dialogue with our speaker and with one another at each table. And the third reason we get together is to invite not only midshipmen but faculty and staff and coaches to get together to encourage interaction with one another at your table, because you together are key elements of the Naval Academy community and essential for the mission to move forward. And finally, we want to send you off back to class, back to wherever you're going to go. We want to send you off full. We want to send you off happy. We're going to give you cookies before you leave. You haven't had one yet. But we want you to not only be full, but we want you to be inspired. We want you to be kind of invigorated, instructed, challenged, be prepared to courageously lead as you move forward from here. And not only just lead, but lead in that extraordinary manner that you're gifted to do. This lunchtime series that we have is made possible through the generous gifts of Dr. and Mrs. Ernst Volgenau. And Dr. Volgenau is a 1955 graduate of the Naval Academy. He's a former Air Force officer. He helped develop space boosters and satellites and computer systems, and he taught in the field of astronautics. He's the founder of SRA International Incorporated. It's an information technology firm of around 6,000 people, listed on the New York Stock Exchange from 2001 to 2011, and then combined with several divisions of Computer Science Corporation to form CSRA. And so 10 years in a row, SRA was listed in Fortune magazine as one of the 100 best places to work in the United States. His wife, Sarah Volgenau, is a 1957 graduate of Morehead State University, taught in elementary schools for several years, and Dr. and Mrs. Volgenau have 3 married daughters and 9 grandchildren. So we're very grateful for Dr. and Mrs. Volgenau's gift of giving us support for this program. We've really been honored today by having as our guest Mr. Bill Kraus. And 9 years ago, Mr. Kraus, along with his friend Steve Newton, or better known as Newt, they bonded together over a really innovative idea. And together they came up with a mission. And the mission was to honor America's military and police officers and firefighters and first responders. Mr. Kraus was a former vice president of marketing for Under Armour. And Mr. Newton, he was a regional vice president with Outback Steakhouse. And together they came up with this idea for this mission, and their design for that was to have what you just experienced, some mission barbecue. Mr. Kraus is committed to this nation. It's interesting to note that I don't know another place in America that is a restaurant that shuts down for 2 minutes at noon. The kitchen stops working. The restaurants throughout America make this announcement They play the National Anthem and everything stops for that 2-minute period. And Mr. Kraus, you're quoted as saying that the best 2 minutes of the day are when the registers are not ringing. I hear people singing. They want to feel better about their country. It's food for the soul every day. I also wish to emphasize that both of Mr. Kraus's sons are Marines, one of who graduated from the Naval Academy in 2017. So, Mr. Kraus, all of us here today are really enjoying the feast on food, but we will enjoy even feasting more as you share a little bit about your passion for those who raise their right hand, for those who serve this nation and our first responders. We also want to hear how does one have commitment like you do to build organizations for purpose? And how do you never lose your ability for able to ask that question, why? That insight that you have, and your focus on asking people about their life. That's a great gift. So we're fortunate to have Mr. Kraus with us this afternoon. So please join in giving Mr. Kraus a very hearty Navy welcome.
Proud and humbled to be here, to say the least, and to all of you that either did or are continuing to serve this great nation of ours. On behalf of myself and almost 3,000 teammates, I just say thank you. Why do we do what we do in life? Do we do it for ourselves? Do we do it for our family? Do we do it for our friends? Do we do it for our community? Do we do it for our country? And a lot of why what we do is shaped by who we are or maybe what we've experienced. And so I want to just tell you a little bit about my why and what led me to ultimately doing what I'm doing. My grandparents came to this country from Germany and Ireland, just trying to build a better life for their families. Both families settled in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My parents were both products of the Depression. They raised my sister and I under this mentality of hard work. You don't get something for nothing. Tough times don't last, tough people do. And that belief really was inspirational for me. I wasn't the most patient kid in the world, so the idea of waiting till I was 16 to get my first job, I thought better that I could be a paper boy at age 12. And then when I turned 14, the local country club would hire you to be a caddy. And I loved this idea of being there at the country club, knowing that I wasn't a member, but I was part of that team aligned with somebody that I deemed to be successful, because here they were belonging to a club and being able to pay somebody to carry their golf clubs. I was a good enough caddy that I was selected to work in the country club pro shop at age 16. It was a privilege, and yet again, you're still just the hired help at the club. And if you've ever worked at a country club, I kind of surmised that there were two types of people. The type of person that would indeed treat you with the respect like you were a human being. And then there was that other faction that seemingly looked down on you and treated you like you were kind of second class. And that really kind of bothered me. And so God loved my folks. They allowed my sister and I to share a car. So I'm a 16-year-old boy thinking that I'm kind of starting to make it in the world, and I got to drive this really, really cool 1972 Country Squire station wagon that had wood paneling and crank windows and an AM radio, and it was rusted as all get out. And so, you know what? I didn't see a lot of other 1972 Country Squire station wagons with wood paneling in the parking lot there at the country club. And so I actually used to park the car next door at the mall and walk over, hoping that nobody would see me getting out of that car, as crazy as that sounds. Because these folks drove really nice cars, and I imagine they lived in really nice houses, and they belonged to a country club. And yet those that I looked to at that club that were successful, that treated you well, I wanted to learn as much as I could from those people. And so then I went off to college. And at that point, it was very clear and understood in our household, my folks would help us as much as they could with the education, but we were going to have to cover the gap of what remained from a tuition standpoint. And then obviously anything in terms of spending money was on us. But that didn't bother me because I'd been working since I was 12. And so I bartended a little bit, and then my life changed. So in school, I loved gym class, I loved recess, and I loved after school. All that other stuff in between, I really had to stay pretty focused on in terms of, because that would be the stuff that my parents would threaten me with and take away from, that if I didn't do well in school or I wasn't nice to my sister, lo and behold, I didn't get to go to practice or I didn't get to play in the games. And so I go off to school, and one of my buddies got hired to run an athletic shoe store. And he asked me if I'd like to come work for him. Well, suddenly, by about day 2, I thought it was the coolest job in the world, because suddenly I could have some status. And as shallow as that sounds, but all of a sudden when you opened up that new pair of shoes or some of the apparel that came into the stores, I could have things that not even the kids at the country club had. And I loved it, because for me, sports was a passion. It was a really easy conversation piece to talk with people about the outcome of a game or who their favorite team or who their favorite athlete was. And it launched me on what became a 25-year journey in the business of sports that culminated in 2001. I met a 28-year-old kid. And this kid was by the name of Kevin Plank, and he had started this tiny little company in Baltimore, Maryland called Under Armour. And Under Armour was not a known commodity. And when I joined the company, there were only about 20 employees. But the makeup of those 20 employees, it was a lot of people that had chips on their shoulders, that were kind of underdogs, that were maybe walk-ons more than they were the scholarship athletes. And we loved what we were able to mold at Under Armour because we felt like it was us against the world. And we were fighting against a pretty formidable foe. They lived out in Beaverton, Oregon. They put a swoosh on their product. Now you'll note that I'll keep that out of my vocabulary because that's a 4-letter word that I try not to use. But you know what? We gave them all they could handle because there was a belief in and amongst that team that our product, our service, and our story of Under Armour could be unmatched by anybody that we were competing with. And it was through that experience, in the time that I was there, 7 years, that we went from 20 employees to 2,000, we went from 10 million to $1 billion, we went from a privately held to a publicly traded company. And I thought life was forever changed for the better. And yet, what I realized during that time period, don't ever confuse your job with your life. And we all get out of balance at times because of our job being really, really busy. But it was during those years at Under Armour, I lost my mother in 2006, my father in 2007, and my one and only sister in 2009. So in a 36-month period, I lost all of my immediate family. And all those riches that I thought were really important were nothing in comparison to then that loss that I had gone through. And so through that time, I decided I had had enough Under Armour. And it was probably time to move on. And I guess I transitioned in my own right, not necessarily knowing what I wanted to do when I took the Under Armour uniform off. That's all I knew. And yet I probably didn't realize at the time, I was probably a little broken mentally, emotionally, physically. And so I started to think, what do I want to do next? And my phone rang. And it was a headhunter out of New York City. And he said, you're a born and raised Milwaukee, Wisconsin kid, aren't you? He said, do you love the Green Bay Packers? I said, I do. He said, how would you like to be the head of sales and marketing for the Green Bay Packers? And I was like, wow. And yet realized that, wow, our oldest son had just graduated college. We had a freshman in high school, and we had an 8th grader. This was home. And I could immediately tell the reaction of my wife was almost of disappointment because she knew she didn't want to stand in the way of ultimately what could be a dream job. And here I was thinking that Under Armour was my destination, but now suddenly I could go be part of my beloved Green Bay Packer organization. And she said, you've got to pursue this. And so Mark Murphy, the president of the Green Bay Packers, flew to Baltimore, Maryland. By the end of that breakfast, he said, I had been told you would be my first-round draft choice. You've done nothing other than convince me. What's it going to take? What's it going to take? So I said, I'd love to fly to Green Bay. I'd love to meet more of the team. And I'm like, this is coming together. And yet I could still feel there was an anchor at home that didn't necessarily have that same sense of excitement that I did. And yet she said, go. And so I went to Green Bay. That went swimmingly well. They said, what's it going to take? I said, I'd love for my wife to come here and see it, experience it. And so God love her at that point, she started to dig into schools and houses and all those things that she knew was going to be her responsibility as we moved again. And so that morning we were supposed to fly to Green Bay. And we actually missed the flight. One of us was running a little bit late, and it wasn't me. And it was the fact that she was begrudgingly leaving the house that day, knowing she was going somewhere she didn't want to go. And so we missed the flight. Packers said, no problem, we've already rebooked you. We're going to connect you through Chicago. We flew as far as Chicago. We walked over to the gate, and I looked up at the board. The flight was canceled. And it was right then that that stubborn German that I am realized this is not right for you and your family. You're going to have to think about doing something else. And so I picked up the phone and I called Mark Murphy. And I said, if this had been 5 years before, maybe 5 years from now, I would have been all in and I would have been a great teammate of yours. But I'm going to respectfully decline. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I hung up the phone, I turned to my wife, I said, if they win the Super Bowl and I could have been wearing a ring, you and I are going to have some issues. And so suddenly I had to think about what was next. I'm not the retiring type. I get energized by just the process of business and the challenge of it every day. And so in 2008, our oldest son enlisted in the Marine Corps. And suddenly my lens got open wide. I'd never served. I was admittedly probably too selfish to serve at your age. And so your willingness to do what you're doing to each and every one of you, thank you. And so all of a sudden I saw places like Parris Island, South Carolina, and Pensacola, Florida, and Cherry Point, North Carolina. And then he's stationed out at Miramar, and then he deploys, and all these things. And I was like, I have to find my way to serve. And so all of a sudden I started thinking, you know what? Maybe I could feed the troops. And so I'm going to pause right now, and as much as I want to tell you a little bit more about this thing that came to life with Mission BBQ, let me show you a little bit about what it is as well. Mission BBQ is nothing other than the story of my best friend Newt and I that had a love of barbecue, but more importantly, a love of country.
We're at Mission BBQ in Annapolis, Maryland. Why are we eating here?
I love what Mission BBQ stands for, the fact that they support the people that serve.
Founders of Mission BBQ, Bill Kraus and Steve Newton, thanks for joining us this morning, guys.
We literally just wanted to build a business that had purpose, that had meaning, that had significance.
Well, this thing got bigger than Bill and I a long, long time ago. One of my goals in life is that 10 years from now, you'll say, besides my pastor, my parent, or a coach, Mission BBQ had the most positive impact on my life.
We opened our first on September 11th, 2011, and damn right we did that intentionally.
This is the outward proclamation, proudly serving those who serve.
And we were trying to remind people how fortunate we are to live in the country that we do, made great by the heroes.
You know, our heroes are those that raise their right hand and swear to protect, serve, and save our community and our country.
One of the heroes that we've already gotten to know is this gentle giant of a man named Alejandro Villanueva. Alejandro's backstory: his father served. Alejandro attended West Point. He did 3 tours of duty, highly decorated. And now here's somebody getting paid to play a little boy's game. But in that little boy is still the heart of a warrior, the spirit of somebody that is selfless.
How are you? Very nice to meet you. How's it going?
And it's hard not to be humbled by great Americans like Alejandro Villanueva.
I think Mission BBQ stands for something that is not just food. It stands for the aura of service.
This work remains very humble. When somebody like Alejandro shares with you the last uniform he wore in combat, you're awestruck that in some way,
Oh, nice.
we have made him feel a certain way and a connection to this brand that he's willing to share something so personal and something that I'm sure he's so proud of.
There's not a lot of organizations that are solely dedicated or honoring these these servicemen and women. So Mission BBQ stands for something more than just unbelievable food. But I'm not gonna lie, the food is also really good.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for being a part of this team. So the Mission BBQ brand here, as we stare down the back half of 2018 and start to peek around the corner for 2019, gosh, the progress we will have made.
Morning, everybody.
We'll finish this year with 80 stores. We will have added 3 more states this year as we've now pushed into Connecticut, Michigan, and the great state of Wisconsin. And yet I think we all believe in our hearts we're just getting started.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for coming.
So I'm sure your first takeaway is, what in the world are you highlighting a West Point guy for? And yet, in Alejandro's heart, his original hope and dream was to attend the United States Naval Academy. And to meet Americans like that, it is very humbling, it is very inspiring. And there's really 3 aspects about our business. It's gotten to the point now within Mission BBQ where people will say to me, you know what I love about Mission BBQ? It's this whole long list of things, and they say, oh, by the way, your food's really good. Like, I'm thinking, but isn't that why you originally came to our restaurant? And yet, a portion of everything we do at Mission BBQ stays in every community that we get the privilege of doing business in. We align ourselves with local fire and police charities, as well as military nonprofits like the Semper Fi Fund, like the Navy SEAL Foundation, like Special Operations Warrior Foundation, as well as the USO. Proud to say this year alone, we'll donate close to $3 million to those charities as just our way of doing our part and being good citizens in the communities that we get the privilege of doing business in. You come take a look at our walls. Most of what you see on our walls has been shared with us. It's beyond humbling when somebody will give us a patch or a picture that speaks to their service, and we just get to proudly display it. And yet in the process, every Mission BBQ is a little bit different, and they ultimately become like this community-owned restaurant that the entire community can share in. And then as we talked about, one of the best things we do at Mission BBQ is every single day at 12 noon, where we shut our kitchens down, everything comes to a halt, we make an announcement, and we play the National Anthem. And we do that because we can, because we're free, and thank you for that. And it's all those aspects that ultimately add up to being something that we hope can be a great brand. A great brand that everybody is proud of and can certainly stand by, and hopefully, too, that you enjoy the food. Anybody ever not been to a Mission BBQ? Sir, what the hell are you waiting for? All these people can't be wrong, right?
I'll take care of that one.
Thank you. But to those of you that are customers of ours, thank you. But more importantly, know that you're all heroes to us, and we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thanks.
One of our commitments is to create an opportunity for this to be a dialogue. So I'm going to be holding a mic, and if you'd raise a hand, I'll get this mic to you so everyone can hear. And Mr. Kraus has agreed to give us a response in some way, shape, or form. Thanks. Here we go. Number 1.
Mr. Kraus, I'm curious to know how do you orient your new employees into your company's values?
It's the beauty of being a privately held company. We make no apologies that we're patriotic and proud. And we are looking for patriotic and proud people. If you're not, that's okay, but we're probably not the right organization for you. If you're selfless, if you have a servant's heart, if you want to be a part of something much bigger than you are, then come on board. We're going to train you, we're going to give you a heavy dose of it, and we're going to forever remind you that we get the easy job in this entire equation. We get to just serve food and say thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Sean Condon, Electrical Computer Engineering Department. Question is about just your experience, a book Malcolm Gladwell wrote called David and Goliath. It's about advantages often have disadvantages. The disadvantage you had of knowing that you had to pay for things, right? You know, that was a major part of who you are. That was like your why statement. But yet you have children who, they don't necessarily have that same disadvantage, right? That you've been basically a place of kind of comfort, right? And your children didn't grow up in that. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about how they've been successful, right? Without that disadvantageous advantage, what did you do? And this is kind of like broader as well, of how do we challenge ourselves enough to be challenged, but not so much that we fail and then we fall back into, like not doing anything.
Thank you. I'm forever reminded, it's amazing what you learn from your kids about what's important. And the decisions and the direction that our oldest son took helped to shape a lot of ultimately the family's future. And it opened my wife's eyes, my eyes, our hearts to something along those lines. No, you're right, they didn't have to serve, they wanted to serve. And I don't know what it was other than humble beginnings that my wife and I had. We were kids that had a kid, and we kind of grew up with our oldest son. And we both worked opposite hours. We had one car, we lived in the lower half of a duplex. And that's ultimately what built us as a couple, and ultimately probably shaped him. And then obviously the influence that he had on his younger brothers, I could never ultimately thank him enough in terms of that. And it's that never forgetting where you came from. I'm just the caddy from the country club. And that's all I am, and I'm never going to profess to be anything else. I sold t-shirts for a living, now I sell pulled pork. I really don't glamorize it any more than that. And I'm going to forever be humbled by what I get to do versus ultimately what my heroes are willing to do.
Great.
Sorry, I'm midshipman second class, Hayden Anderson, and I guess this is more of a thank you than a question, but this just popped into my head. My sponsor mom, when I first got to Annapolis, we were driving through downtown Annapolis, and she pointed out Mission BBQ, and she's really active in local politics, and she said, they didn't remove that sign. And I just remembered that you left the sign up from what was, I guess, before a historical Annapolis location and general store. And I just think that that speaks as much as everything else, and it's something so tangible to your service to this community. And so thank you for that. That's something that I think means a lot to a lot of people here, and now by extension of that means a lot to me. So.
This decision to open in downtown Annapolis was very emotional. And I know you're not supposed to be emotional in business, you're supposed to be rational always. But the idea of being on the corner of Randall and Dock for hopefully many, many years. And so the history of that building is the Stevens family operated a hardware store there for 53 years. And all I feel like we get to do is the privilege of being in their building. And we just tried to do the right thing for the right reasons. And there was no thought on ever taking their name off that building. That's their building. We just get to occupy it and hopefully make them proud of ultimately the business that's now operating. Take great pride in that before Mrs. Stevens died, she had the opportunity to come in and see what we'd done with it. And her tears spoke volumes to me that she was proud, and we just try and make her proud every day.
Mr. Kraus, what was the most significant thing that you learned from Kevin Plank?
I was just actually with him yesterday. And Kevin, he's got a walk-on mentality. And he's afraid of getting cut every single day. And so he's going to outwork you. And he still has that mentality, though his company is now a $5 billion company. And I could feel it in him yesterday. It was the same Kevin Plank that I met in 2001. He is still inspired to be doing what he's doing. He's focused on hopefully the task at hand and what lies ahead. And he wants to continue to win. And that winner within him is ultimately what led him to having the success that he does. And now I get the privilege. I don't have to be with him every day, but I get to feed him and his teammates a lot. So I guess indirectly I'm still cashing checks from him. But the satisfaction, when I left, the most important thing to me was that Kevin Plank and I would remain friends. Because I think about that opportunity to be on his team and how it forever changed the trajectory of mine and my family's life.
Sir, how did you move successfully from an entrepreneurial type of organization where you had just a few stores to now you have a much larger organization, but you still have this commonality amongst the stores, but they still have an individual flavor. How did you keep the culture right as you made that transition from small to pretty big?
So there's a proverb that says if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. I believe that in life, and I believe that in business. I've got the best partner in the world in life, and I've got the best partner in the world in business. And Steve Newton, my partner, was a chemical engineer by trade that ended up in the restaurant business, and thank God he did. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And so Newt and I just have this mentality like we're running a lemonade stand. Anybody ever run a lemonade stand as a kid? So somebody needs to run the front, and somebody needs to run the back. You're going to be shocked when I tell you, I want to be the guy in front. And Newt wants to be the guy in the back, wants to have on a white lab coat, he wants to have a beaker, because he's never going to be convinced we're good enough. And the policy, the procedure, the execution is all the genius of him. I just try and stay out of his way and not screw it up. But ultimately, my job is if I can just get somebody to walk through our restaurants, I have all the confidence in the world, our operations team, the quality food, the quality service, and the overall experience that you're going to get consistently within Mission BBQ. You can trust it. You know what matters when you're building a brand? Everything. Because you don't know where somebody is going to fall in or out of love with you. And as I mentioned, there's a whole litany of things you could argue whether are important to the business or not. We're going to make certain that we've built a lot into the business while still keeping it simple. And what I mean by simple, we focus on 4 things at Mission BBQ. Great people, great food, great service, and great results. And it's nothing more complicated than that. At Under Armour, we focused on great product, great service, great story, great team. It's the same building blocks and the same foundation. Don't overcomplicate business. Kevin said to me last night, he goes, I'm so jealous of you. You have 7 SKUs that you have to worry about versus you think about the litany of things that a company the size of Under Armour now has in all the different categories that they're in. Don't overcomplicate business. Don't overthink it. Every business that we're in comes down to one thing. I said to the Admiral, what do I worry about the most? People. Do we have the right people in the right places, and can we attract more? I forever ask our teammates, find more like you, because we really like the core group that we have, and if we can build upon this, this brand has potentially a high ceiling. No matter where we go in the United States, I don't have to wonder and worry whether or not there's firemen, policemen, veterans, active duty, reservists. I know that they're there. I can't wait to ultimately, hopefully, feed and thank every single one of them.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions. I see him now. I have 3 questions. Good. Let's start here.
Sir, name's Joe Malley. I'm a Naval summer coach. Met you a couple weeks ago in Starbucks, and I talked to you about my daughter having worked at Mission, started a month and a half ago. And the first question relative to like employees kind of living the mission itself and how they buy into it. And I have a 17-year-old daughter who, like you kind of mentioned, and I'll get probably a little emotional, but trying to find her way. And we're kicking her out the door to find a job at 17. And she loves going there every day now. And I think it speaks to a process and a belief in something and a company motto that just keeps driving it into their employees. And so thank you for that. And as well, I'm a civilian. I joke that I'm probably the most civilian human being on this campus. But to have the opportunity to work with people who knew what they signed up for when they did is very noble, and I feel much the same as you do. So thank you for
sharing your daughter with us.
Serving them. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. My name's Louis Nicolau. I coach Barclay here. And as you can tell, I probably eat at your restaurant 2-3 days a week.
Doesn't make you a bad guy.
I
You do
know.
all those other days.
I love it. Your French fries kill me. I'm sorry. You talk about building a brand, and I want to get your thoughts about that 4-letter word, going political. I used to coach at a place where we had athletes take a knee, and now we have coaches wearing a flag over the swoosh, and they're not allowed to do that. And so it's this double standard, and this one, you know, the political climate and what you think about that for little word, doing the Kaepernick commercial and that kind of stuff.
I'll probably choose the words carefully, but they've always been about the individual. I'd prefer to be part of a team, because I believe this whole thing that we all live, it's a team sport. I'd rather align myself with the Alejandro Villanuevas of the world than necessarily the position that they've taken. I respect their decision. We're free, we're safe, thank you for that. So I guess it's that freedom of choice. I choose to have other beliefs.
We have a question over here.
Sir, Midshipman Bo Kendrick Holmes, thank you for being with us today. My question is, in your business, you have to make tough decisions. So how do you go about making tough decisions when it comes to Mission BBQ? And what's an example of a tough choice you've had to make with your business?
Thanks for the question. Ultimately, you try and take emotion out. And it's hard when there's people involved and there's lives involved that might be impacted or affected. But to ultimately just forever try and do the right thing for the right reason, you'll ultimately, further you get removed from that, realize that it probably was the right decision, as hard as it was in that particular moment. Probably the hardest thing is what we haven't done yet in terms of serving more, giving back more. We're going to forever try and be that company that is the first responders to first responders. We don't need each other in life when it's easy. We need each other in life when it's hard. And we want to forever step forward and stand alongside in those times of need. And I'll never feel like we can do enough in terms of somehow, in some small way, paying you all back for your service and your sacrifice.
Anyone? Well, I do have one. Just glad you asked. I have one for you, sir. So we live in a culture as warriors where risk is a very significant part of our decision matrix. And you've shared with us in your journey at times of making appropriate risk criteria, kind of moving through. And as a leader from a different culture than, you know, the warrior culture, and I'm including hopefully coaches and faculty in this whole equation. Can you just share with us, for the midshipmen especially, how should we look at risk? Personal risk and in your culture, team risk. Would you just speak on that for a moment?
So when I wound up the whole Under Armour thing, I had this idea about, it wasn't Mission BBQ, it was just the idea of potentially opening a restaurant. And so I went to my financial planner and I said, hey, I think I'm going to get in the restaurant business. And he said, the heck you are. He said, don't you know that 90% of restaurants fail? And I said, yeah, but don't you know that 10% of them succeed wildly? And that's where I want to focus. And ultimately, it was being able to have a partner like Steve, and then just trusting our gut, but we never got too far ahead of ourselves. We opened our first one up in Glen Burnie on September 11, 2011. And if that hadn't worked, we wouldn't be here today. And it wasn't until it was working to the extent that we were comfortable that we opened a second one 14 months later. And so to not get too far ahead, but ultimately the more we continue to believe and the more we continue to be able to find more people and surround ourselves with more proud patriots, the more we started to think this thing has a chance. And yet still to this day, and people tell me all the time, 71 stores in 7 years, my gosh, that's quick. I don't think it's fast enough. Because now I'm beyond worried about the risk as much as focused now more on the opportunity. And I guess I'm that kid that will tell all the mids, dream big dreams. They happen. right? And as long as you believe in yourself and you surround yourself with others that maybe have similar beliefs or similar passions, there's nothing you can't do. One of my favorite movies of all time, it's called The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. And he's down and he's destitute. And at one point he says to his son, don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do anything. And I couldn't believe that anymore. And when I look at you all and what you could potentially do in your futures, as well as shaping our countries and our community, I just say thanks.
That's really special. Thank you. Anyone else? On your way out today, I'll remind you to pick up a cup at the table. This cup is part of a shared cup, isn't it?
It is. So we created this series called the American Heroes Cup. It's a one-time purchase of $3.99. If you bring it back in, you get a 99-cent refill. But more importantly, we take $2 of that initial $3.99 and we donate it back to an organization of just our way of doing good. So when I get excited is when I think about the 5-year plan of Mission BBQ that'll probably take us to close to 200 stores. But more importantly, I look at that line that says charitable contributions. We believe we can contribute somewhere between $25 and $35 million over the next 5 years to organizations that are doing great work and ultimately supporting you all, the heroes. So thank you.
Thank you. We do wish to, with huge gratitude, thank you for being here this afternoon and sharing from your heart and letting us know kind of the journey and the path that you're on. And as future mariners and mariners here already, we know that people find their direction at sea with a compass. And Stockdale Center and the Naval Academy is committed to supporting not only the nautical compass, but the moral compass. And how do we steer? How do we know what our true north is? So on behalf of the Stockdale Center and the Naval Academy, we'd like to present this as a token of the moral compass, and may that be something that you would enjoy. Please receive that as a token memento of this afternoon, and thank you for your time. So just appreciate speaking and sharing, and the video as well. So thank you. For our Naval Academy participants and guests, we're very grateful that you took time out of your very busy schedules. As we all know, time is the currency of this kingdom, and you've given us a lot of your time, so we're grateful for your attendance. I would like to thank Ms. Marge Bem over here for taking care of us as the Stockdale Center's Senior Staff Associate, and Ms. Jacqueline Dana over here, who's been taking care of us as the center's educational specialist, and they helped make today what it is. So everyone, by the way, we'll send out this afternoon a kind of a post-luncheon seminar. Just we'll love to hear from you. So you can offer us feedback as how we study the compass as we move forward with our special luncheons here. And we're grateful that you did come today. So God bless America. God bless each one of you as you leave here, and make sure as you exemplify honor, courage, and commitment that you have that cup displayed proudly somewhere. So thanks again for being part of today.